Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and welcome to the Post 61, Building Powerful and Meaningful Boundaries. This post comes via request from the legendary Queen L. Queen L sent me an email, and I will read that email to you with this request with the identifiers removed, and you'll see why shortly. To the email. Dear Tara, thank you for your career guidance through your YouTube videos. I completed my PhD in 2023, and prior to that, I watched all your videos on applying for and preparing for a job. I applied for and was interviewed for 2 academic positions and received job offers for them both. You rock, girl. I'm now in a full-time continuing B-level academic post at blank University. I know I would not have landed this job without your tips, so thank you very much. Rock and roll. I'm 3 months into my role and I absolutely love it. Yay! A few weeks ago though, my manager told me that I'm, quote, too nice, end of quote. Now I've been brooding over this and I don't really know exactly what to do with it. From my initial research, it seems to be connected to assertiveness. End of quote. Now I'll stop the email there to remove all identifiers. Okay, so firstly, Queen L, congratulations on your hard work. You are absolutely brilliant. What a star you are. I'm proud of you. We are all so proud of you. You did it, yeah. Now, firstly, you should not be in this position. You see, managers have a responsibility to be even. And particularly when we've got new colleagues, new to the university sector, every word, every phrase we deploy must be deployed with care, or else exactly what's happened to you, we say something that might be flippant and suddenly it cascades into a deep worry for a new colleague. So firstly, this is not about you. But secondly, it's also not about assertiveness. The key is the creation of boundaries in the workplace. You see, functional boundaries are everything really. They allow you to control your life and your time. They allow you to control your emotions and your emotional responses to the people around you. So this is really important because as a junior staff member at a university, you will be disrespected. You will be expected to do the rubbish work. You'll be expected to do the administration, what's often described as the housework of universities, which of course goes on to disrespect the pretty tough labour that's done in the family home. But we will summon what I'm describing as a taxonomy of boundaries today. Emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, boundaries of time. Now, each of these boundaries are in fact different, but what I want you to do, what I want us all to do, is think about the workplace, think about our lives more generally, with boundaries as the punctuation of our social space. And one of the key reasons we construct boundaries is so that we don't feel overextended. So setting boundaries at work allows you to complete tasks. So it allows you to be productive. It also allows you to understand your workload and the workload of others. Yeah. And it also reduces distractions through personal chatter and gossip. It's also a way to avoid exploitation. And if you are being exploited, for all our friends out there, if you are being exploited today, hi, I see you, let's handle this. Interventions are possible, and I'm going to do medium and long-term interventions today. But short-term interventions that you can apply today are wearing headphones in an open plan office to stop the chatter and the gossip, email management and constructing what's often called a calm inbox, and a great example that I have done, put a note on my door with the door closed. Remember, my door's always open, but door closed with a note on my door saying, I am completing a report between 10 a.m. and 12 noon today. Please only interrupt if it is an emergency. I will be available after midday. Put that on your door. Now, these are what are called circuit breaker techniques, and they allow you to commence your self-assessment of you and your boundaries. Look at how you're using your time. Look at moments and write about it if you can. Put it in a journal. Look at the moments where you're feeling uncomfortable, you're feeling a bit weird, something is going wrong. And what I want you to do is start to develop a map of your current boundaries. And then I want us all to configure a new reality, and that's what my project is today. I want to configure the boundaries that you want and give you the strategies to communicate those boundaries to others. So Queen Elle, I'm going to offer 10 suggestions, yes, Tara's 10 tips for the creation of an effective, respectable and calm workplace. Now, you can absolutely disagree with me. Absolutely, that's brilliant. But you may find even 2 of these strategies something that you can lean into while you're working out the rest of this new working environment. Now, I know, and this is not, I don't think, Queen Elle's situation, but I know when you're in the middle of a bullying, a toxic, a gaslighting environment, you feel like you are alone in the universe and you are the only person that has experienced this. You are not. I've got you by the hand, and together we are all with you. So hell, let's do this. 1, create a crisp boundary between the personal and the professional. Now, everything begins with this tip, colleagues. A workplace is a workplace. Now, one of my early posts responded to a great former student of mine who wondered if he should be bringing his whole self to work. So using the phrase that's used in cliched PR departments in different workplaces. So bringing the whole self to work. And he was being harassed because the entirety of his identity, the entirety of his work was sort of being collapsed into his identity as a gay man. So there's very little to gain by bringing your personal life into the workplace, and there's a hell of a lot to lose. So we need to remember that universities are one of the few really hierarchical institutions that are left on the planet. And schools, departments and faculties exploit and overwork junior staff. Now, most of us have shocking stories to tell when we look back on our careers, or when, a senior person threw a course at us, a whole course, the day before it was being taught, or certainly the week before it was being taught. That is common for junior staff. But it's less common now, thankfully, because we have now in most universities very strong workload policies. Now, I am the biggest supporter of transparent workload policies because it protects junior staff. And that's why I like, and when I've certainly been head of school and head of department, fully transparent workload policy. So everyone has their figure that's been configured by the algorithm, and that is a public document. So you can see exactly who is doing what. Now, any private information that you share in the workplace may and will be used to manipulate and exploit you to do other people's work. Now, our universities certainly have great people working for them, but we have bullies, we have predators, and we have incompetent people working in our universities. And we'll return to some of these characters in the farce shortly. So please, keep your private matters private. Do not share. Do not overshare. Don't use words like work family or work spouse. You work with co-workers. They are not your family. And I hope you've only got one spouse, and that person is not your boss at work. So please don't confuse these categories, even metaphorically. Don't use this language. Keep your home and your work life radically separate, and whatever you share with others will be used to manipulate you. 2, do your research quietly and create your articles and achievements away from the gaze of the powerful. Now, I know in social media land this seems highly antithetical, but let me tell you why. Now, I've enacted this principle of keeping my research pretty close to my chest since 1998. And I've worked in some absolutely debilitating, exploitative bullying environments in the last 30 years. And I've worked with and worked for really nasty, aggressive men and nasty, aggressive women. So this rule of protecting my research and not oversharing the research began at Murdoch University in 1998. You see, in December 1998, I just won a teaching award as the best teacher in the country. Great. And so what that meant, the consequence of that, and luckily I pretty well realised this in real time because I had great friends around me, is after winning that teaching award, I was put in the teaching box. So Tara teaches. So that is the binary opposition: men research, women teach. And the ideology from that binary opposition still survives in our present institutions. But I realised in December 1998 that I was going to receive no support from any human to move out of that binary opposition, because I was needed to teach all the hours that God sends so that blokes could develop their research career. So all the teaching was put in my box. And I knew that was going to happen, but I was not going to sacrifice my research because of the behaviour of other people. So of course I'd been getting up at 3 a.m. and I quietly started to get up at 2 a.m. and I did 2 hours of research before I went to the gym, before I commenced my working day. And during this period, I was teaching a literal double full-time teaching load. So the workload figure we had to get to was 400. I was teaching 840, 860, 880 workload points, literally double. And during this time, I produced 10 articles a year, 2 book chapters a year, and in the decade I was at Murdoch, I produced 5 books. But of course, as far as the hierarchy was concerned, they didn't know any of this. I was just simply an awarded teacher. And my research career just sort of quietly grew and grew and grew and grew outside of the spotlight. Now, what I was doing started to be noticed about 5 years in at Murdoch University, when it started to become embarrassing. And I'll explain why it was embarrassing. At that time in Australia, there was a research, the way research was funded was through Herdic points. So you'd get a point for a refereed article, you get 5 points for a singly authored book, you get the drill. And it started to become embarrassing because I was producing more research outputs and more coin than the full professors. And I was just a bunny B-level lecturer. So this started to get embarrassing and a bit ridiculous. And the head of school then explained to me at the time that I was being selfish. And it was important that I added the names of other members of the school so that the Herdic points could be shared around. Now, I ignored him because, of course, adding authors in this way who have done nothing for the research is against research ethics. It's unethical in terms of publishing and professional codes. So I kept on producing articles and book chapters and books without any support or time at all. Now, I've done this for my entire career, and to this day, about 80% of the publications I produce are singly authored. And this is the key. I have published every single year since 1993. Now, many of you weren't born in 1993, but I've published every year since 1993, no matter what has happened. Moving jobs, moving countries, Steve's death, no excuses. Get up and do the research. Do not allow the users, the manipulators, the bullies to claim or to colonise your research. I want you to create a boundary around your work and protect it because it matters. And by the way, research success like this on its own terms does anger people. Even this year, I'm recording this in 2024, a senior academic, a professor who was really, to be frank, nowhere near a professorial title, had a posh title but no credibility, no outputs, no publications, so in some ways a vanity professorial title, had a capacity to tell me that I was again, quote, selfish with my research, thinking I hadn't heard that word before. So this word selfish, when you hear it, is used to create a culture of guilt, blame and shame. Do not let these people succeed. Remember, what's going on here? I get up at 2 a.m. in the morning. I do it because it's the right thing to do for me. It's not selfish, it's disciplined, it's ethical, and it's output driven. The only person who could complain about me getting up at 2 a.m. is my wonderful husband, Jamie Quinton, and he doesn't because he knows the research matters. So please remember, protect your research, put a boundary around it. 3, do not gossip. Do not participate in gossip. It hurts people. Okay. I know often our universities seem like they're fueled on gossip, but do not participate in it and do not allow yourself to be subjected to it. Terrible things happen in every single human being's life. And again, wherever possible, maintain my mantra. Work separate from home, professional separate from personal. On every occasion that I've had to disclose a personal matter in a workplace because it would impact on the working day, I've been hurt badly by that disclosure every single time in 30 years, and I do it very rarely. Let me give you an example. As some of you may remember, my beloved late husband, Steve Redhead, was diagnosed with late stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And when that diagnosis emerged, he asked that I would be his sole carer. He asked that he would be kept away, his phrase, not mine, kept away from the medical industrial complex, and that the illness would be kept absolutely private until the night of his death, when he instructed me how I would reveal that death. That was the instruction. And that was important, to be frank, because when someone's life is taken away from them, they have a right to determine what the rest of that life looks like and what their death looks like. But anyway, less than 5 people were informed of this illness, and they were mostly in my university, because obviously I was going to have to probably go to the hospital. It was going to be very quick to an active dying situation. So certain people needed to know so I could walk out of the office if I had to. And can I say 2 of the 5 people that knew were my then bosses, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research, Rob Saint, and Vice-Chancellor Colin Sterling. And I named them because both of them were absolutely incredible. A textbook example of being a great human and a great boss when the worst thing happens to one of their senior leaders in a university. They were so good to me, but I tell you what, they were so good to Steve. Colin Sterling, the Vice-Chancellor, wrote Steve handwritten letter thanking him for all he's doing, wishing him well, bless him. And it meant so much to Steve. So these men respected Steve as a scholar, as a man, as a human being, respected me, but you know what? They respected our privacy and never told anybody. Good human beings. Good human beings. But I had to tell another pretty senior administrator who had a role controlling my calendar. And of course she did gossip, and I found out a few times because the person she told bounced back at me and said, "Oh look, I'm so sorry, I've just heard." Always remember that privacy matters. Gossip hurts people. Other people's lives are not your business. And gossip is used by insignificant people suffering from severe spotlight deprivation. If someone trusts you, then I tell you what, be worthy of that trust. Protect your boundaries. Protect other people's boundaries. Do not gossip. And those flippant words have real consequences. Life and death consequences. 4, bullies require control over your emotions. Do not let them do this. Bullying is catastrophic for workplaces, and it is incredibly common in universities and incredibly common, can I say, in Australian universities. It's been studied. 20% of staff in Australian universities have suffered bullying, with much higher levels in regional universities. So a great study from Timothy Skinner in 2015 showed that bullying in regional universities was even higher than that in metropolitan universities. 36% of academics in regional universities reported experiencing bullying, and in one university, I think we all know which one it is, 42% of staff reported that they'd been bullied. And what does this behaviour look like? How does it manifest? Well, public humiliation, exclusion, intimidation, discrimination. Wow. So bullies require information from you to operate. They require you to be invested in their behaviour and that you are interested in their views and opinions. And obviously for Queen Elle, this is very commonly used against junior staff. It's used to keep junior staff frightened, unstable, not really sure what's going on. And the reason they want you unstable is that so that you take on that course that nobody wants, or you get onto that committee that no one wants to be on, so they can get on with their research. Bullying exists only to make us suffer, but it also consolidates another human being's power and increases your dependence on them. And I'll give you one example of this from the most bullying university I've worked in. And you all know I've worked in some shockers. But I've worked in some bad universities, and some pretty dreadful leaders have led me, and heavy inverted commas here. But the worst person I ever worked for, and it is an expansive field, the worst person I ever worked for used all the techniques that I'm talking about today, not only against me. It wasn't about me, it was about all the high performing professors in the faculty. And in a 6-month period, a series of colleagues just resigned and took another job. They retired, and one colleague killed himself. Okay. So importantly, her line managers sat back and allowed her to do this. You see, a bully can't really survive unless there's a bullying infrastructure around them. And I understand why this happened, really, because she was a weak teacher, a weak researcher, and she had nowhere to put the rage and the fear and the jealousy and the worry that she would be found out. So she channeled all of these pretty yucky emotions into bullying. But of course, Steve and I were pretty experienced. We applied all the things we're talking about today. We know what's going on. We know what to do. We had rigid separation of professional and personal lives. Our emails were being monitored, but we knew they were being monitored, so that's fine. And so we kept everything hyper professional, and then absolute separation, silence to our personal lives. Very, very separate. But even with these rigid boundaries in place, bullying continued to occur. Let me show you what this looked like as a warning for you. Okay, so this dean called a 30-minute meeting with Steve and I at 8 a.m. one morning. And we both worked in her faculty. I was in communication and he was in law. Now, the HR representative for the faculty was also with the dean. So the dean sat at the table with the HR person, and we were instructed to stand during the meeting. And she said she had 2 matters to address, the first involving me and the second one involving Steve. Now, you notice we were married, but there were separate issues to address. So why wouldn't you have separate meetings to address these 2 separate issues? And the answer is this had nothing to do with professionalism. In fact, it was the antithesis of professionalism. She was trying to, attack one of us, and so the other one would respond, right? So trying to actually upset our professional and personal boundaries. Of course, we were very wise. We knew this was going on. And she forgot that Steve was a University of Manchester trained lawyer, so they trained him hard, they trained him tough, and he instructed me clearly on my behaviour. Anyway, so the first matter she wished to discuss was my teaching review for my first semester at the university, and the results had been released the previous week. Now, I not only received the best teaching review in the history of the faculty, I received the best teaching review in the history of the university. And nobody was more surprised than me. It was a first-year course, lots of students doing it as an elective. I'm a chick, we don't do well in teaching reviews, so everything was working against me. But, the teaching review was benchmarked against standard deviations, and look, the result pleased me a lot. I worked really hard on that course. I was thrilled. But I had not mentioned the review to anybody. Keep all achievements very, very close. The email arrived, I opened it, smiled, closed it, got on with the rest of my day. Unfortunately, there was a teaching and learning dean in a meeting that week that acknowledged how great this was. I went, thanks very much. Now, straight after that meeting run by the teaching and learning dean, my faculty dean immediately called that meeting. Okay. And her commentary to me was brilliant. Really, I've remembered it, and I try and teach it to others so that you can be calm when these sort of languages and phrases are used at you. Quote, "You're not as good as you think you are. We've all received teaching evaluations like this. I'm a great teacher. I know great teachers. You're not a great teacher." Okay, bless. Now I was silent for a moment, but unfortunately I am an Australian, and I then started to laugh like a kookaburra and explain the falsity of her statement, that actually not everyone had received results like this. This was the highest result in the faculty, was the highest result in the university, so therefore I had got a higher result than her. Logic is like that. And from that, she sort of jumped into crazy anger, and no real words, just sort of vowels. Okay. And then she finished with the phrase, "You're nothing. Remember that." Okay. So most importantly, the HR delegate that was there did not speak and just kept taking notes. So you might think this is bad. This is nothing. This was the warm-up act for what happened to poor Steve. And Steve, by the way, had to stand there next to me while this nonsense was occurring. Now, what had occurred is Steve's wonderful father, Jeff Redhead, had died the previous Friday in the United Kingdom in the north of England, in Preston. And Steve had been notified via email. We'll come back to that in a second. And Steve continued to teach, do his research. He hadn't told a soul. He was incredibly sad, but he was a very private man, but incredibly sad, and was sleeping really badly. There was a lot going on, right? But he kept it very private, kept him to himself. But, of course, an email notified him of his father's death from his brother-in-law in England. And the emails were being monitored. So the dean, after it finished with me, then turned to Steve and stated, quote, "I note your father has died. I wanted you to know in person that I will not approve the leave. We've all got personal problems, Steve, and I note you haven't asked me about the health of my father." Now, she was refusing Steve's right to go to his own father's funeral, noting he hadn't asked and wouldn't have asked for the leave, but then minimised the loss of a father with the statement, "We've all got personal problems." Okay, so I've told that story in some depth so that you can see that 30 minutes that's been cut from the history of higher education. And I hope, if nothing else, that is a warning to you to maintain personal and professional boundaries. Never elaborate on your achievements. Never do this. They will be used against you. Never admit weakness or something as tragic as sickness or death, because it will be used against you. Please don't think that this university system is kind or benevolent or compassionate. It is ruthless. It is uncaring. It is brutalizing, and it is intentional and conscious in its attacks on staff, particularly in moments of vulnerability. So remember, particularly to monitor the new leaders, the new managers that exist in new universities and regional universities. You see, bullying is the go-to strategy for these colleagues. It's to block, to cite our earlier post, their own personal mirror moment. They will use every technique to push you down, to unsettle you, and to discredit academics who are not only better than they are, but may be better than they are, which is why it's actioned on junior staff. 5, weak boundaries enact gaslighting. Now, obviously, we've done bullying and boundaries. We have to do the evil twin, gaslighting. Gaslighting is a term derived from a play by Patrick Hamilton from 1938, and of course became the famous film directed by George Cukor in 1940. And the characters of Gregory met the beautiful Paula, and it was a whirlwind, romance and marriage. But then from the marriage state, Gregory used every opportunity to create this profound vulnerability and confusion in Paula. So she started to question her own sanity, question her grip on reality. So with Paula in this weakened state, Gregory's violent past could be hidden from the present. Now, from this film, a technique and abuse strategy got its name. Yes, gaslighting. And Queen Elle, that's why I parked all my other work to create this post as quickly as I could for you. The situation that's happening to you may be very calm, and quick boundaries will be able to organise that. But just in case that is the first sortie in a gaslighting cascade, I need you to hear the characteristics of gaslighting. Gaslighters use your own words against you. Private information is twisted, it is warped and made available for public consumption. They plot against you, they lie about you to your friends and to your colleagues, they aim to isolate you. They deny your needs, they deny your requirements, and they make sure the focus remains completely and exclusively on themselves. And they rely on excessive displays of power, and they construct alternative facts. They construct lies to serve to exploit you. So gaslighting, the goal of it is to disorient you, to place doubt in your mind, and often the most trivial of incidences are used to create gaslighting. Now, gaslighting must be stopped immediately. You need to have those rigid boundaries, professional and personal boundaries, and do not allow any bleeding between these categories at all. And hopefully this is the dream. You've got a person in your life. It may be a parent, it may be a friend, it may be a partner who can be that accurate mirror to you, to tell you the truth. This is true. This is reality. That is lie. That is fabrication. Now, gaslighting is a key technique that is used in toxic environments, including toxic workplaces. It's a proxy for substandard or mediocre managers who attempt to discredit the staff that are working for them because they're better than they are. But somehow these people have gotten to a position of power through patronage, the Peter Principle, leverage, and these people have ended up in positions of power. And I often think about this, I'm writing about this a lot, I've written about this a lot in the last 5 years. If an incompetent person is put in a position of power, what do they do? Be a pretty stressful situation. Now, in the old days, an incompetent manager, an incompetent leader could cruise a bit, would take a while before their incompetence could be discovered. But now with Google Scholar, we can see exactly who this person is. They're doing the big talk, but in 12 seconds we can go to Google Scholar, see they've got nothing, they've got very few publications, they're doing the big talk, you need to do this, research metrics, blah, 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 and you go to their career and there's nothing there. Very little research, or they've spent their career being the fourth author of 10. They've been the freeloading postdoc. And then, of course, for all the bluster of people going teaching and learning, and then you go to their profile and they don't actually hold any teaching qualifications, and there's no proxies or verifications to show remotely that they know what they're doing with teaching and learning. So the emperor, the provost, the dean, the DVC, even the vice-chancellor has no clothes, no credibility, and they're hypocrites. Okay, so therefore, if you're a hypocrite, how do you get bright people? How do you get academics to follow your leadership if you, as a leader, have underperformed through your entire career? And the answer is, you've guessed it, gaslighting. So when we think about gaslighting, colleagues, what we're looking for is, and there are 3 characteristics, an intention to harm, an imbalance in power, and a series of repetitive actions. So therefore, for our PhD students, for our early career researchers, watch for these characteristics. Have rigid boundaries and don't leak emotion because it will be used against you. 6, boundaries enable professional development. Yes, it's been a very heavy post this week, I know that, but there are positive attributes to the construction of boundaries. And this was a great argument, changed my life actually in the book I read this week, an argument made by Sue Han Rhodes. And she argued that boundaries allow us to separate ourselves from others, allowing us to see ourselves without compromising to the needs of others. And boundaries also configure a diagnostic. We can see our own strengths and, yes, our own weaknesses, and develop both of these through a clear understanding of reality and stemming from our personal values, what we see as success. So you see, if we value or overvalue the views that other people hold of us, then we don't know what's true. We don't know what's real. But when we have our boundaries in place, we see ourselves as we actually are. And we use metrics, we use criteria that are of value to us and stemmed from our values. So from here, you see, once we've got that, we can enact a learning life. We can enact and summon our professional development program rather than sit in satisfaction or relinquish our lives and our value to the views of other people. 7, boundaries ensure we communicate our needs on our terms. That's really important. We can have the boundaries, but we've got to communicate them, okay? Boundaries ensure that our relationship with others is not based on assumptions. We have to speak the words of those relationships. This is important in a workplace. We must communicate rather than assume our needs and how we will be treated. Healthy professional boundaries are created when these clear expectations are summoned and that over-familiar colleague is put back in their place. Now, there have been shocking men that have behaved shockingly in the 30 years of my career. They've been sleazy. They've visited my home without permission. I would never give my address out, but because they went onto the HR system, they got my address and so had to come round my house. Yuck. And I always remember when I told my then colleagues after the fact that I'd married Steve Reedhead, and I had to tell them because I was teaching with him. He was a visiting professor at Murdoch University, and it would be a conflict of interest. And we were teaching together. I then got a call from a senior colleague, not in congratulations. No, the call, they were clearly several fingers of scotch to the wind, saying, "I thought we'd always be together. I thought you were waiting for me." Creepy, eh? And trust me, I'd seen how he treated students and colleagues. Hell would freeze over, dear friends. Hell would freeze over. But look, he continued to behave badly. Now, all of this bold and the beautiful excess shouldn't be necessary. And for my Australian colleagues watching this video, we are now post-respect, respect now always. We are post the student safety report. This is great stuff. And we now have a strong visibility for sexual assault and sexual harassment. Now, look, I've had to run away from blokes for 30 years in universities, and we now have proper policies and procedures in place, so you will not have to put up with this rubbish. Keep the boundaries though. Do not be intimidated. Do not be frightened. Yes, there are sexual predators in our universities, but there are good policies and procedures now to help you. And I also want to do a shout out particularly. I know we have a wonderful community on our YouTube channel of gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans colleagues, our rainbow community. And the student safety survey showed that the rainbow community in particular is suffering from sexual assault, sexual harassment, particularly online. Okay. Now, firstly, you need to know we see you, we care, and there are policies and procedures to look after you. Communicate your boundaries and know that you are supported in policy and procedure when you do so. Remember, and number 8, remember, saying no is a full sentence. No! When I was a junior academic, I was completely ignored most of the time, and I was completely exploited most of the time. And this is not right, it's not appropriate. Academics eat their own young. But can I say, in the last 16 years of my life, when I have been a full professor and held British chairs and so forth, dreadful and exploitative behaviour has also emerged. And I've been asked by higher ups to do really dreadful things. Now, so much of our health and our happiness in a workplace is based on having a good boss. And in those 30 years, I've had 2 great bosses, and they've made all the difference in the world. People with integrity and decency and dignity. They've got a great career themselves. They don't have to rip anybody off. They know who they are. They're self-actualized. Wonderful. And can I say, I've also worked for some gangsters who really should not be let anywhere near a leadership role. And they really don't know what they're doing. They make a lot of mistakes, and that's fine. People make mistakes, people fail, that's cool. They make a lot of mistakes, but the problem is the gangsters then try to implicate other people in the mistakes that they have made. And as shown by Cloud and Townsend, the word no is integral to the building of boundaries because it reduces the confusion, the ambiguity between responsibility and rights. So the word no allows you to respond to an issue rather than react to an issue emotionally. Now, I know this is really messy as an employee. You are paid to do work, and I get that. And if we can fix and help somebody, we will. You know, if someone spent 2 years of creating a mess and I can fix that mess in a day, I will fix it. That's fine. But the key point here is do not work against policies, procedures, legislation, and law. And that includes the Research Code of Conduct in Australia and in nations around the world. Therefore, we need a reminder that no is a complete sentence, and an early no is a kind no. The challenge we have is that at this point now, we've got incredibly desperate leaders, I'm using that word intentionally, desperate leaders in our organisations who can't and won't accept no because they want to, they need to share their shambles. So therefore, make sure before you start a job, you've read the policies, you've read the staff code of conduct, you understand the laws, the regulatory environments. And then, of course, you can contextualise your no with the codes of conduct. Now, again, I'm sorry that this is necessary, so sorry. A no is a no. No! But we work in desperate times, and many of us have worked for pretenders. And these pretenders get themselves into a lot of trouble, and when they do, they try to pull as many people into their mistake as possible. Now, your no matters, but back it up by policies, code of conduct. 9. Remember that your boundaries may disappoint people. So sad. There's all sorts of language that we use at the moment. You know, the people pleaser, the people that want to be liked, just like me, the people that want to be popular. Am I popular? Now, maybe because I was the unpopular old goth at school, I was hated. I was that person eating my apple in the corner of the playground. Right, maybe because I was that unpopular kid, being liked has never remotely been a goal for me. Now, I'm not bothered by what people think of me, particularly when I don't respect them. So if I think they're rubbish, why would I care what they think about me? Now, I have a strong, very strong personal boundary. I have great friends that are very close to me. We've known each other a lot of years. Trust them till the end of time. When they offer me advice, I take it. Very tight boundary. But what a random thinks about me, why should I care? Why should you care? Why should you care? But be aware that in a workplace, boundaries do create disappointment and they create anger. And the reason they create disappointment and anger is because your boundaries stop people exploiting you. Professional boundaries create a healthy and a productive environment, summoning clear expectations, but of course also block exploitation. Remember, when we set boundaries, colleagues are going to use phrases at you like, "I'm so disappointed in you." So sad. They're disappointed because they can't offload their work on you, they can't drag you into their errors and failures and issues, and they can't behave inappropriately, including sexually. Therefore, be prepared for the disappointment of others when you are sustaining your boundaries. And yes, 10 we got here. Deploy digital dieting. Digitisation is the enemy of strong professional boundaries. Now, importantly, Australia has just introduced legislation in August 2024 called the right to disconnect. Doesn't mean you have to disconnect, but the right to disconnect. So you finish work at 6 p.m. and you don't have to answer emails at home. You don't have to take a call if you choose not to. The right to disconnect. Great. And that means people can have an end to their working day if they choose to. Now, team, I'm so old, I'm so close to death, that I was present at the start of email being introduced in universities. And can I say, when it was introduced, this thing was really convenient. People could answer queries asynchronously. They wouldn't be in your office, they wouldn't be on the phone, send an email, and around your teaching and research, you could respond to their query. Terrific. Now, of course, emails are the work. This is madness. And then, of course, we're adding mobile phones to this story, delivering emails to mobile phones. This is a nightmare. And as you know, I have a very disconnected relationship with my mobile phone. I don't need it. I rarely use it. I actually don't know where it is. And when I find it, it is not charged. And the reason for all of that is because I do work. I do actual tasks. I don't get up at 2 a.m. in the morning so I can waste time on my phone. Yeah, nah. And I understand strongly, and I teach all of you, the relationship between platform, information, and audience. Now, mobile phones block a clear configuration of interface management and to explore the relationship between platform, information, and audience. You've heard me say so often, really only 2 people need to carry a mobile phone. They are sex workers and drug dealers. And at this juncture, I don't fulfill either of those career options. But you see, what's happening is poor leadership is using mobile phones. And the reason they're using mobile phones is because they haven't enacted planning or organisation. Now, in response to their incompetence, I always use the line, and I love the line, your lack of organisation is not my emergency. Your lack of organisation is not my emergency. So take control of your life, manage digitisation. And all sorts of great strategies are emerging now to manage hardware, software, and interfaces. Now I've seen, and I'm not great on this, can I say, but I've seen great use of automated email, confirming when emails will be answered, confirming a calm inbox, lovely stuff, and also communicating to scholars and colleagues when they can get a full reply from you. Great stuff. Now, let me give you an example of how I do this. I do this via time management rather than interface management. So when I've been dean or head of school or head of department, I've always got to work very early. And I do that for many reasons. And one reason is so that the digital workflow is processed, and it's processed before my colleagues arrive. So this means all the forms are checked off, theses are checked off, examiners are checked off, authenticate reports are checked off. All of this is done before 7:30 in the morning. And this is to ensure that when my colleagues arrive at 8:30 in the morning for their working day, they're not waiting for me. They're not having to send more and more emails to, oh, by the way, have you had a look at this? Yeah, nah, the work is done. Now, my staff know that they can come to work and their workflow has been completed. And you see, this is about the management of time, but it's also about the management of boundaries and respecting the time and the boundaries of others. Similarly, run meetings from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Anyone that puts a meeting on at 8 a.m. or at 4:30 p.m. has never had to care for another human beyond themselves. People holding positional power have choices, and with ease, those colleagues can make decisions to respect the boundaries of others and create a civilised and healthy workplace. So remember, whenever someone has positional power and they're working in emergency mode all the time, they phone you every minute, every hour that God sends, or they demand their right to do so, and they select really inconvenient times for meetings, then they're unable to construct their own boundaries and they're unable to respect the boundaries of others. As Rhodes has stated, quote, "A leader without boundaries is difficult to trust," end of quote. So digitisation certainly makes boundaries slippery, so I need you to construct overtly and clearly communication strategies to confirm your digital boundaries. So digital privacy is crucial. Think about that digital privacy in your life and assemble those boundaries. Now, Jaurès' great research has shown that personal success and organisational success is about constructing and communicating the parameters of acceptable behaviour, creating a working culture of respect, not fear, and constructing and implementing guidelines and policies and procedures that protect the time, the energy, and the professionalism of others. So when we assemble these boundaries for ourselves, we are defining what can and what can't be done to us, and we are not allowing the expectations of others to hamper or undermine or define our lives or our value. As Cody Evans has confirmed, boundaries configure a moment of consciousness. I love this. Boundaries configure a moment of consciousness, stating what we are able to give, but also our limitations. This week, what I'd like us all to do, and please put it in the comments, tell us how you're going. I'd like us to all trial this self-discipline mechanism. Please don't think that other people have your best interests at heart. They don't. Most people, as Tawwab has shown, would prefer to have you suffer in silence than for them to be inconvenienced. So let's practice words like no. No. Stop. No. Stop. I won't be able to help you. This is not appropriate. Universities are hierarchical, they're exploitative environments. Ruthless academics, the problem is, ruthless academics do get on. They do add their names to papers, get the metrics in place. They cut corners in their teaching and research. They don't teach if they can get away with it. They avoid administration. They push. They use and abuse positional power, and yes, they bully. In such a time, therefore, let's all of us focus on healthy boundaries. Let's have an awareness of our emotional, mental, and physical capabilities, clear communication, clear values, and comfort in saying no and hearing no. No! Queen L, we are with you. And please keep in touch. Let us know how you get on. I wish you love, light, and peace. T out.